"Get water from the well and leave by dawn," the lonely cowboy said to the native woman. The sun was sinking low behind the dusty hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. The wind carried the dry, earthy scent of the plains, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote's howl echoed faintly. A lone cowboy rode slowly along a narrow, uneven trail. His horse, tired and dusty, moved steadily, its hooves kicking up small clouds of dirt with each step. The man himself was quiet, his face weathered by long days under the sun, his eyes scanning the horizon as if expecting trouble at any moment. He had been traveling for days, following a trail that led him far from the nearest town. His boots were worn, his hat battered, and his coat had seen better days. Yet he carried himself with a quiet determination, the kind of determination that comes from having nowhere to go but forward. He was alone, as he usually was, and he liked it that way. There was a certain peace in being the only person responsible for himself in a wide, empty land. But even peace could be lonely, and the loneliness of the plains sometimes weighed heavily on him, pressing down on his chest like a physical thing. Ahead, he saw a small homestead nestled near the edge of a grove of trees. Smoke rose from a single chimney, twisting lazily into the sky. It was a simple place, a wooden cabin, a small fenced garden, and a well near the back where water could be drawn. The cowboy guided his horse carefully toward the homestead, hoping for a chance to rest and, most importantly, to find water. The trail had been dry for miles, and he could feel the thirst in his throat, rough and urgent. As he approached, he noticed movement near the well. A woman was there, bent over, drawing water from the well with practiced ease. She was young, with long dark hair that fell in loose waves over her shoulders, and her skin was sun-kissed from life in the open air. She moved with grace and care, as if every action was intentional, every motion deliberate. When she lifted the bucket and carried it toward the house, she didn't immediately notice him, focused on her task, humming softly to herself in a quiet, melodic tone that seemed almost a part of the wind. The cowboy slowed his horse and called out, his voice low but steady. "Water," he said simply. The woman froze mid-step. Her eyes flicked toward him, wary and cautious. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, she measured him with a careful glance, taking in the man who had appeared seemingly from nowhere, covered in dust and shadowed by the late afternoon sun. There was something in his eyes, quiet, calm, but watchful, that made her hesitate. He was not one to rush in or cause trouble, but he was a stranger, and strangers could bring danger. "I need water," he said again, softer this time. "Just water." "I'll leave by dawn." The woman's brow furrowed. She did not speak his language fully, and he did not speak hers. But the meaning was clear. She nodded once, slowly, and gestured toward the well. Carefully, she stepped aside, giving him room to dismount and draw water himself. There was an unspoken agreement between them. Help was offered, but boundaries were respected. The cowboy tied his horse to a post near the cabin and approached the well. The woman watched him, her eyes cautious but not hostile. There was an unspoken tension in the air, the kind that comes from two people who know the world is bigger than themselves, and that trust must be earned, not given freely. He lowered the bucket into the well, the wooden walls creaking softly as it descended. When he pulled it back up, water sloshed over the edge, clear and cool. He drank greedily, the water soothing his dry throat and calming the tightness in his chest. He filled his own container, careful not to waste a single drop, and then looked up at the woman. She was smiling slightly now, a small, polite gesture, though her eyes remained cautious. The cowboy nodded in return, a silent acknowledgement of her help. Then he spoke again, in a voice that was low and steady. "I'll be gone before dawn," he said, repeating the promise. The woman inclined her head, understanding him perfectly this time. She returned to her chores, drawing more water for herself, tending to a small garden of vegetables that grew stubbornly in the dry soil, and checking the small fire near the cabin for supper. The cowboy watched for a moment, appreciating her quiet diligence. There was something remarkable about her calm focus, the way she moved through the world with confidence and care. As the sun sank lower, the shadows lengthened. The cowboy set up a small campfire near the edge of the homestead, careful not to disturb the woman or her space. He ate a simple meal of bread and dried meat, the kind he always carried with him on long journeys. The wind shifted, and he could hear the distant rustle of leaves, the soft trickle of water from the well, and the occasional call of a bird settling in for the night. The world felt vast and empty around him, but here, near the well and the woman who watched quietly from a distance, it felt manageable, almost safe. Night fell fully, and the sky filled with stars. The cowboy leaned back against a log, staring upward, thinking of the miles he had traveled and the places he had been. He had met many people along the way, some kind, some cruel, but there was a loneliness that always followed him, no matter how far he went. Yet here, in this quiet corner of the plains, with a woman who had helped him without question, and a well that provided life-giving water, he felt a flicker of connection, brief but meaningful. The woman returned occasionally to the edge of the firelight, carrying water or tending to small tasks. They did not speak much, words were unnecessary, but there was a shared understanding between them. Each had survived in a harsh world by being careful, by being aware of danger, by knowing when to act and when to wait. And now, by chance or fate, their paths had crossed, and for a brief time they were no longer entirely alone. Hours passed, and the cowboy prepared for sleep, rolling out his bedroll with care. He kept his gun nearby, not because he expected trouble, but because the world had taught him caution. The woman, now inside the cabin, continued her quiet work until the faint glow of the moonlight slipped across the garden. She paused, listening to the night sounds, thinking of the stranger who had come and asked for water. There was something about him that seemed different, a quiet honesty, a restraint that set him apart from others who had come seeking help or taking what was not theirs. As the night deepened, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of the plains and the distant hills. The cowboy lay on his bedroll, staring at the stars, reflecting on the day's events. He thought about the woman, her quiet strength, her careful movements, and the way she had helped him without question. In a world where trust was rare and danger often waited around every corner, this small act of kindness felt significant. By the time the first hints of dawn colored the horizon, the cowboy was already awake. He packed his belongings quietly, careful not to disturb the woman. She would be leaving soon, as she always did, and he respected her choice to maintain her own path, just as he maintained his. There was no need for words. The understanding between them was clear. They had shared water, shared a quiet evening, and shared a fleeting moment of connection in a vast, lonely world. And as the first light touched the homestead and the well, the cowboy mounted his horse, tipped his hat in silent thanks, and prepared to continue his journey. The woman watched him go, a small smile on her face, knowing that for a moment two people had found a measure of trust and understanding, however brief, in a world that often offered neither. The trail ahead was long and the sun was climbing, but for now, the memory of water drawn at dusk, a shared fire, and the quiet companionship of another human being would travel with him. offering warmth and comfort in the days to come. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and the distant sound of birds waking to the day. The cowboy had traveled far since dawn, riding through open plains that seemed endless. Yet the memory of the small homestead and the woman who had helped him lingered in his mind. Water, he reminded himself, had been precious and life-saving. But it was more than that. Her calmness, the way she had moved through the world with quiet purpose, left a mark on him. He wondered what it would be like to speak with her more, to understand her world beyond the simple act of fetching water. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher. The cowboy paused by a dry creek bed to rest his horse, the animal breathing heavily, ears flicking at the sound of the wind in the grass. He looked around at the vast emptiness, and despite the loneliness, he felt a strange sense of peace. The plains could be harsh, unforgiving even, but they also offered moments of clarity, moments where one could feel entirely present in the world. He scratched at the horse's neck, murmuring words the animal could not understand, but seemed to appreciate. Meanwhile, the woman had returned to her village, a small settlement hidden among groves of trees that offered shade from the relentless sun. Children played near the edges of the camp, their laughter ringing out like a gentle melody. Elders moved slowly, tending to small tasks, weaving baskets or repairing tools. The woman shared the story of the cowboy's visit with her people, describing the man who had quietly asked for water and promised to leave by dawn. Her tone carried a mixture of curiosity and caution. Her people listened carefully, understanding the need for caution around strangers. The plains were full of travelers, many seeking help, some with good intentions, others with less honorable motives. But there was something different about this man, the woman insisted. He had not demanded, threatened, or taken without permission. Instead, he had asked politely, waited patiently, and respected boundaries. Her elders nodded slowly, acknowledging her words, their eyes reflecting the wisdom that came from decades of observing the world around them. Later that day, the cowboy reached a ridge overlooking a wide valley. The valley was dotted with small groves, patches of wildflowers, and a narrow river cutting through its center. He dismounted and surveyed the land, considering his next move. He needed supplies and perhaps a chance to rest longer, but he knew venturing too close to towns could be risky. There were people who distrusted outsiders, who might not welcome him kindly. And yet, he also felt a pull, a curiosity about the community scattered across the plains. There were stories to learn, skills to observe, and people to meet. He continued his journey slowly, following the river, keeping it in sight as he moved. The water would guide him, just as it had guided the woman to his help the night before. The trail was not easy. Rocks and uneven ground tested both him and his horse, but the rhythm of the journey, the steady clop of hooves against the earth, was comforting. It reminded him that he was moving forward, that the world was larger than his own problems, larger than his own solitude. By mid-afternoon, he came upon another small homestead, abandoned and quiet. The doors creaked on their hinges, and the windows were dusty and cracked. He dismounted and examined the place carefully, searching for any signs of life. There was none, but he did find supplies, dried food, a small amount of water, and tools left behind. He gathered what he could carry, careful not to disturb the place unnecessarily. Each item was valuable, not just for survival, but as a reminder that people had lived here, had worked hard to create a home even in such a harsh environment. As he prepared to leave, he noticed tracks in the soft soil nearby, footprints of someone passing through recently. He followed them briefly, curious, but they led him to nothing more than the riverbank. The cowboy knew that life in the plains was often fleeting, People came and went, seasons changed, and the land endured. Yet there was a rhythm, a balance that one could sense if they were attentive enough. He paused, letting the wind carry his thoughts, and then mounted his horse again, continuing along the trail. Back at the woman's village, she went about her day with careful attention to detail. She filled baskets with gathered herbs and roots, checked on the small garden that provided food for her people, and spoke with the children, teaching them simple songs and lessons. Her mind occasionally drifted to the cowboy, wondering about his travels, imagining the places he might see and the challenges he would face. She felt a strange connection, one that did not require words, only recognition of shared understanding. As evening approached, clouds began to gather in the distance. The sky darkened slightly, and the wind carried a hint of rain. The cowboy found shelter under a natural rock overhang, setting up a small fire to cook a simple meal. He listened to the wind rustling through the grass, thought about the woman and the quiet wisdom in her actions, and felt a faint sense of companionship despite the distance between them. The world could be lonely, but it was also full of these small, unexpected connections. Night fell again, and the cowboy lay beneath the stars, thinking about trust and survival. He had always been cautious around strangers, but the woman had shown him a different side of human nature. Help could be offered without demand, kindness without expectation, and respect could exist even in the harshest conditions. The thought brought a warmth that went beyond the fire he had built, a comfort he had not felt in years. The woman, meanwhile, prepared for the night in her village. She checked that children were safe, fires were contained, and the village was secure. She sat for a moment near the well, recalling the brief encounter with the cowboy. There was a simplicity in their interaction, yet it was profound. It reminded her that even in a world where danger and hardship were constant, small acts of trust and cooperation could make a difference. The next morning, the cowboy awoke to the sound of birds and the first light of dawn creeping over the hills. He packed his belongings, refreshed by the rest and water he had gathered from the river. He continued along the trail, moving steadily toward the distant mountains he could now see on the horizon. Each step brought him closer to unknown challenges and new encounters, but he felt ready to face them, armed with the lessons of the past days. In the village, the woman began her morning chores with the same careful attention she always did. She thought about the cowboy's journey, wondering what obstacles he might face and what sights he would see. The wind carried his presence to her in memory, the dust on his coat, the calm determination in his eyes, the way he had drawn water without taking more than needed. She smiled softly, knowing that sometimes even brief meetings could leave lasting impressions. Throughout the day, the cowboy navigated the plains with cautious optimism. He encountered small herds of deer, tracks of predators, and occasional signs of other travelers. Each encounter required focus and respect for the land. He had learned over years that survival depended not only on skill, but also on awareness, patience, and understanding. The plains demanded attention, and he gave it willingly, moving with purpose and care. As evening fell, the cowboy found a small grove of trees beside a slow-moving stream. He set up camp, letting the horse graze nearby. The water reflected the sky, darkening as the sun set. He thought of the woman, wondering if she would think of him too, if she remembered the night he had drawn water from the well. The connection, though silent and unspoken, gave him a sense of grounding in a world that often felt vast and indifferent. Night descended fully, and the cowboy lay beneath the stars once more. He reflected on the day, the people he had imagined, and the lessons learned from brief encounters. The world was unpredictable, but there was value in kindness, in respect, and in observing the balance between trust and caution. These thoughts lulled him into a quiet sleep, the wind whispering through the trees as a gentle reminder that even in solitude there was connection, and even in uncertainty there was hope. By the next morning, the cowboy rose, ready to continue his journey. He knew the plains held many challenges, but he also understood that moments of trust and shared purpose could offer guidance and comfort. He mounted his horse, looked toward the distant mountains, and began riding again, carrying with him the memory of water drawn at dusk, a quiet smile shared in understanding, and the promise of survival through patience, respect, and courage. The sun rose slowly over the plains, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. The cowboy had been riding for hours, following the river that had guided him before. He had kept a steady pace, alert for any signs of danger. The plains were vast and open, but that did not mean they were safe. Predators, both human and animal, roamed freely, and any traveler could quickly find themselves in trouble if they were not careful. As he rounded a bend in the river, he saw smoke rising in the distance. His heart quickened, but he remained calm, studying the scene carefully. The smoke came from a small grove near a homestead, the same grove where he had met the woman days ago. He spurred his horse forward cautiously, hoping to reach the water source before anyone noticed him. The thought of seeing her again filled him with a strange mix of anticipation and concern. He wondered how she would react to his return, and whether the quiet trust they had shared would hold in the face of new challenges. When he reached the well, he noticed something unusual. Footprints had been left in the soft soil, and some of the wooden planks near the well were disturbed. The woman was there, drawing water as she always did, but her movements were quicker, more alert. She paused when she saw him, her eyes narrowing slightly, and he understood immediately that something was wrong. "They've been here," she said softly, her voice steady but carrying a note of urgency. He did not need to ask who they were. Bandits or rival settlers had likely come, searching for water, supplies, or anything they could take. The plains had always been harsh, and the people who lived there had to be vigilant at all times. The cowboy dismounted quickly, tying his horse to a nearby post. "We need to protect the well," he said, his voice low but firm. He could see the tension in her shoulders and the way her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the bucket. This was not the first time she had faced danger, but it was clear that she had prepared for these moments by herself before. Together they would be stronger. They moved cautiously around the well, checking for signs of intruders. The woman had already filled several small containers with water, ready to move them if needed. She had a methodical approach, the kind of careful planning that came from years of observing the land and understanding its rhythms. The cowboy admired her focus and knew that she had saved them both by being alert and prepared. The wind shifted, carrying faint noises of movement from the nearby grove. The cowboy gestured for her to stay low and quiet. They crouched behind a cluster of rocks, watching as two men emerged from the trees. The bandits were rough-looking, armed with makeshift weapons, and their eyes roamed greedily over the well and the small homestead. They had no respect for boundaries, no thought for the people who relied on this water. The cowboy and the woman exchanged a quick glance. There was no need for words. They understood each other perfectly. She would distract them while he prepared to defend the well if necessary. She moved quietly to a different angle, keeping her presence hidden but visible enough to draw the bandits' attention. The cowboy readied himself, standing tall and calm, his eyes fixed on the approaching threat. "Water?" one of the bandits said roughly, pointing toward the well. "We need it. Hand it over." His voice carried a mixture of threat and impatience, expecting compliance without resistance. But the woman did not respond. only kept moving subtly, signaling for the cowboy to wait. The tension built, each second stretching longer than the last. The cowboy knew they could not allow the bandits to take the water, not just for themselves, but for the survival of the village and the homestead. He stepped forward slowly, keeping his hands visible to avoid provoking unnecessary violence. "There's enough water for everyone," he said calmly. "But you need to leave. You can't take it by force." The bandits laughed, a harsh, grating sound.
"We take what we want," one of them spat. "No one tells us what we can or cannot do."
He raised his weapon slightly, a crude club that could still cause serious harm. The woman stepped closer, positioning herself where she could intervene if necessary, her eyes sharp and determined. A tense standoff began, the kind that could erupt at any moment. The cowboy stayed calm, observing the bandits' movements, anticipating their actions. He noticed small things, the way one of them shifted weight, the way the other's eyes flicked toward the well, the subtle signs of hesitation. These details would guide his response. Suddenly, the taller bandit lunged toward the well, grabbing one of the water containers. The cowboy reacted immediately, placing himself between the man and the well. "Stop!" he shouted. The voice carried authority, a calm force that contrasted with the bandit's aggression. The woman acted at the same moment, grabbing a small stick and waving it to draw attention to herself, forcing the bandits to split their focus. The plan worked. The bandits paused, confused by the sudden movement and coordination between the two defenders. The cowboy used the moment to push the water container back toward the well, securing it. "This is not worth it," he said firmly. "Leave now, or you will regret it." His words were steady, but his body was ready, alert to any sudden attack. The bandits hesitated, then slowly stepped back, their greed tempered by caution. They had not expected resistance, and they had certainly not expected to face two people working together with such calm precision. After a tense moment, they muttered curses and retreated, disappearing into the trees as quickly as they had come. The cowboy and the woman stood by the well, breathing heavily but unharmed. The adrenaline slowly faded, replaced by a quiet relief. "Are you okay?" he asked, glancing at her. She nodded, a small smile appearing on her face despite the tension. "Yes," she replied. "Thanks to you, we did it together." For a few minutes they stood silently, listening to the wind rustle through the trees and the water gently lapping in the well. There was a deep sense of connection between them, born not of words, but of shared experience. They had faced danger together and emerged stronger, their trust in each other strengthened by the challenge. The cowboy refilled his container, careful not to waste a single drop. The woman helped him, moving with quiet efficiency, her presence steadying and calming him. They spoke in short, simple words, enough to communicate plans and observations. The bond between them grew, built on mutual respect, shared danger, and the understanding that sometimes survival depended on cooperation. As the sun began to set, the plains took on a golden hue, the shadows stretching long across the land. The cowboy and the woman worked together to secure the well, ensuring that it would be protected from any further threats. But they reinforced the small fence around the water, checked the surrounding area for tracks, and moved the containers to safer positions. Every action was deliberate, every movement purposeful. Night fell, and the cowboy built a fire nearby, letting the warmth and light provide comfort after the tension of the day. The woman tended to her own tasks, ensuring the village would have enough water and that the children were safe. They shared a simple meal in silence, the quiet companionship more meaningful than any words could convey. As the stars appeared, the cowboy reflected on the events of the day. The plains were unforgiving, but they also offered lessons in trust, courage, and the value of working together. He thought of the woman's calm determination, her ability to face danger with clarity and strength. He realized that in the vast loneliness of the land, such moments of connection were precious, even fleeting. The woman, too, sat quietly by the fire later that evening, thinking of the cowboy. She had always been cautious with strangers, but he had earned her trust through action, through respect, and through understanding. The danger they had faced together had forged a bond between them, subtle but unbreakable. She smiled softly, knowing that even in a harsh world, trust and cooperation could survive and even thrive. The night passed with quiet calm, the wind rustling softly through the trees, carrying with it the promise of a new day. Both the cowboy and the woman slept lightly, aware that the plains were unpredictable, but comforted by the knowledge that they had each other's support. They had faced conflict and survived, and that survival had strengthened more than just their bodies. It had strengthened their understanding, their respect, and their connection. By dawn, they were both awake, ready to continue their daily routines, knowing that more challenges would come. But they also knew that together they could face anything the plains might throw at them. Water had been defended, trust had been earned, and the bond between a cowboy and a young woman had grown deeper in the face of shared danger. The night was dark, with only the pale light of the moon casting long silver shadows across the plains. A cold wind swept through the trees near the well, carrying with it the scent of earth, water, and something less easy to identify, a hint of danger. The cowboy sat quietly on the ground, his back against a tree, listening carefully. Every sound was magnified in the stillness, the rustling of leaves, the distant call of an owl, the soft trickle of water in the well. His horse grazed nearby, alert to every movement, its ears flicking at the slightest sound. The woman moved silently near the well, her steps measured and careful. She checked the water containers, ensuring they were secure, and glanced around the perimeter of the grove. Something in the air told her that trouble was approaching. The tension from previous encounters had left a mark, and she knew that bandits or other unwanted visitors could arrive without warning. But this time felt different. The wind carried a sense of urgency, a warning that danger was closer than ever. The cowboy had sensed it too. He rose quietly and scanned the surrounding trees. Shapes moved in the darkness, figures that did not belong. He counted 4, maybe 5 men, advancing cautiously toward the well. Their faces were hidden under wide-brimmed hats, and they carried rough weapons, clubs, knives, and a few crude firearms that glinted in the moonlight. Their intentions were clear. They had come for the water, for supplies, or perhaps just to assert control over the land. The woman whispered his name, and he nodded in acknowledgement. They had no time for hesitation. Every second counted. "Stay close," he said softly, moving beside her. She adjusted her footing, keeping herself between the cowboy and the well. Together they formed a silent line of defense, their movements synchronized by trust and necessity. The bandits paused at the edge of the clearing, scanning the area. One of them stepped forward, a tall man with a harsh voice. "We just want water," he called, though the tone was more a threat than a request. The cowboy stepped into view, standing tall and steady. "There's enough for everyone," he said calmly. "Take what you need without violence, or leave." The bandits laughed, a sound that grated on the ears, echoing in the still night. "You don't get to tell us what to do," another man said, brandishing a knife. "We take what we want." The tension was almost unbearable. The woman held a stick tightly, ready to defend the well if needed, her eyes sharp and unwavering. Suddenly, one of the bandits lunged forward, moving faster than the others, The cowboy reacted instinctively, stepping between the man and the well, blocking his path. "Stop!" he shouted, his voice carrying authority that seemed to startle the intruder. The other bandits hesitated, unsure how to proceed against someone who moved with calm precision. The woman acted immediately. She moved to the side, raising a small container of water and splashing it toward one of the bandits, not to harm but to distract. The man stumbled back slightly, surprised by the sudden action. The cowboy took advantage of the moment, pushing the first bandit away from the well and forcing him to retreat. Together they worked seamlessly, their movements coordinated without words. But the bandits were persistent. They regrouped quickly, circling the well in an attempt to overwhelm the defenders. One of them raised a firearm, aiming carelessly at the cowboy. The man fired, but the bullet struck the ground nearby, kicking up dirt and rocks. The sound startled the horse, which neighed loudly and reared slightly. The woman moved closer to the cowboy, steadying herself, her heart pounding but her mind focused. The cowboy took a deep breath and addressed the men firmly. "This isn't worth your lives," he said. "Leave now and no one will be hurt. But if you continue, you will regret it." Oh, his voice carried a calm intensity that made the bandits pause. They had not expected such courage or such a steadfast defense. The woman mirrored his stance, her presence reinforcing the message. They were united, ready to protect what was theirs. For a tense moment, time seemed to stand still. The wind shifted again, rustling the leaves, and the moonlight caught on the edges of the bandits' weapons. Then, one of the men made a sudden move toward the well, attempting to grab a container of water. The cowboy acted immediately, blocking him with his body while simultaneously pushing another away. The woman joined in, striking lightly with her stick to create openings and distractions. The bandits were caught off guard by the unexpected coordination and precision of their defense. Slowly, the tide turned. The bandits realized that taking the water by force would be far more difficult than anticipated. Their confidence faltered as they struggled against two defenders who were determined, alert, and fearless. One by one, they began to retreat, muttering curses and complaints until finally they disappeared back into the darkness of the trees. The cowboy and the woman stood silently for a moment, listening to ensure the threat had truly passed. Their bodies were tense, adrenaline still coursing through their veins, but relief washed over them. The well was safe, and the immediate danger had been averted. The woman allowed herself a small, genuine smile, a rare moment of lightness after the long hours of vigilance. "We did it," she whispered, more to herself than to him. The cowboy nodded, feeling a sense of pride and gratitude. "Together," he replied. The word carried more weight than usual. It was not just about defending water. It was about the bond they had formed, forged in the fire of shared danger and mutual respect. The night did not end there. They spent the next few hours securing the well, checking for tracks, reinforcing the fence, and ensuring that the containers of water were placed safely. Each action was deliberate, careful, and methodical. They spoke little, but the silence was comfortable, a sign of understanding that did not require words. As the sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn, the cowboy and the woman took a moment to rest. The tension of the night had left them both exhausted, but it had also strengthened their connection. They had faced danger together, relied on each other's instincts, and come through unscathed. There was a quiet satisfaction in that, a reminder that courage and cooperation could overcome even the harshest challenges. The cowboy refilled his own water container, grateful for the woman's guidance and presence. "You're remarkable," he said quietly, almost as if speaking to the wind. She looked at him, her eyes calm and steady, and shook her head slightly. We protect what we need to survive, she said. That's all. Her words were simple, but they carried wisdom and strength. The first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the plains. The bandits were gone, the well was safe, and the land seemed momentarily at peace. The cowboy and the woman watched in silence, taking in the beauty of the morning, the stillness after the storm. They knew that life in the plains would always be unpredictable, always filled with danger, but they also knew that they could face it together. By mid-morning, they began to discuss their next steps. The woman spoke of the village, the need to ensure water and supplies were secure for the coming days. The cowboy listened, offering advice and assistance, careful not to overstep, but eager to help. Their coordination had grown stronger, and each trusted the other's judgment. The bond between them was no longer just about survival. It was about respect, understanding, and the quiet acknowledgement of shared experience. As the day progressed, they continued their work, maintaining the well, checking the surroundings, and preparing for any future challenges. They moved with efficiency, their actions synchronized from hours of shared effort. The cowboy felt a deep sense of admiration for the woman, not only for her bravery but for her intelligence, her resourcefulness, and her ability to remain calm in the face of danger. The woman, in turn, respected the cowboy's courage, his steady presence, and the way he had stood by her without hesitation. They had proven to each other that trust could be earned, that cooperation could triumph over aggression, and that even in a harsh and unpredictable world, bonds could form that gave strength, comfort, and hope. By the time the sun was high in the sky, the well was fully secured and the immediate danger had passed. The cowboy prepared to continue his journey, but he knew that this day, this night, and this shared experience would remain with him forever. The woman offered him a small smile, a gesture of acknowledgement and gratitude, and he returned it with a nod. There were no grand words, no promises made, only the quiet understanding that their lives had intersected in a meaningful and lasting way. The plain stretched out before him, vast and open, yet no longer entirely lonely. The bond forged in the darkness of the night, tested by danger and strengthened by cooperation, gave him a sense of purpose and connection that he had not felt in years. He mounted his horse, glanced once at the well and the woman who had defended it with him, and began to ride toward the horizon, carrying the memory of courage, trust, and shared resilience in his heart. The first light of dawn spread gently over the plains, turning the sky into a soft canvas of orange, pink, and gold. The air was still cool, carrying the faint smell of grass and water. The cowboy stirred on his bedroll, having slept lightly after the tense night of defending the well. His horse shifted nearby, nuzzling at the feed he had left, and he quietly untied it, careful not to wake the woman who had already begun her morning tasks. She was at the edge of the grove, moving with her usual calm efficiency. The small village behind her was beginning to stir, children emerging from their shelters, elders checking supplies, and others tending to the animals or the garden. Yet her attention was partly on him, watching quietly as he packed his belongings. There was an understanding between them. He would continue his journey as he always did, and she would continue to protect her people and the land. The cowboy approached the well one last time, drawing water to fill his container. He paused, watching her move gracefully, her actions precise and careful. Even after facing danger together, she remained composed, a model of resilience. He thought about the night before, the bandits, the fear, and the relief afterward. They had faced danger together and survived, yet their connection had grown stronger in those moments of shared courage. "You saved the well," he said quietly, almost to himself. The woman glanced at him, her dark eyes meeting his. "We both did," she replied simply. Her voice carried the same calm authority as before, a quiet reminder that life in the plains was not easy and that survival depended on cooperation as much as courage. He nodded and offered a small smile, feeling the weight of their shared experience. There were no grand words needed. The memory of their teamwork, the trust they had built, and the quiet understanding between them spoke louder than anything they could say. The cowboy refilled his own containers, careful not to waste water, and prepared to mount his horse. The woman walked toward him, carrying a small bundle. She handed it to him without speaking. Inside were dried herbs, some food, and a token of her village, a small carved piece of wood shaped like a bird. "For your journey," she said softly. He accepted it with gratitude, understanding that the gift was more than food and supplies. It was a symbol of respect, trust, and the bond they had formed in a world that often offered little comfort. "I will carry this with me," he said. "Always." The woman nodded, her expression calm but warm. She had not expected to form any connection with a traveler passing through. Yet here it was, quiet but significant. The plains were full of loneliness, but in rare moments brief connections could leave lasting impressions. He mounted his horse slowly, glancing around the grove and the well. The sun was rising higher, casting a golden glow on the land, illuminating the trees, the garden, and the village behind her. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the fresh morning air, and felt a sense of peace despite the challenges that lay ahead. The world was unpredictable, but moments like this reminded him that trust, courage, and cooperation mattered more than any danger. The woman returned to her tasks, watching him move away from a distance. She felt a quiet pride, knowing that she had acted with courage and intelligence, and that the cowboy had recognized her strength. Their paths had crossed for only a short time, yet the impact of their shared experiences was lasting. She reflected on the lessons of the past days, the value of preparation, the importance of trust, and the strength that could be found in unity. As the cowboy rode along the trail, he thought about the journey behind him and the miles yet to come. He had faced many challenges in his life, but the encounter with the woman and the defense of the well had left a profound impression. He realized that survival was not just about skill or strength. It was also about understanding others, cooperating when necessary, and recognizing courage in unexpected places. The plains stretched out endlessly before him, the golden light of the morning making the land appear almost magical. He rode slowly, savoring the calm of the early day and the memory of the night they had faced danger together. Each step of the horse was steady, rhythmic, and grounding. In his mind he replayed the events, the bandits approaching, the tense standoff, the shared strategy, and the relief when the threat had passed. Each memory reinforced the respect and trust between him and the woman. He passed familiar landmarks, the river bend, the rocky ridge, and the grove that marked the beginning of the journey. Each place brought memories, both of the danger and the cooperation, the fear and the courage. The cowboy felt a quiet gratitude for having met her, for having shared in a moment of connection that transcended language, culture, and circumstance. It was rare to find such understanding in a harsh world, and he carried it carefully, as one would a fragile treasure. Meanwhile, the woman returned to the well, tending to it with careful hands. She ensured the containers were secure, the water was safe, and that the village had enough for the coming days. She thought about the cowboy and the journey ahead of him, imagining the miles he would travel and the people he might meet. The token she had given him, a small carved bird, was more than a gift. It was a bridge between two worlds, a reminder that even brief encounters could leave lasting significance. Time passed slowly, yet the memory of the night, lingered. The woman shared her story with the village, explaining the courage of the cowboy and the way they had defended the well together. Her people listened carefully, understanding that survival in the plains required not only vigilance, but also recognition of skill, courage, and respect. The story became part of their shared memory, a lesson for future generations about cooperation and the bonds formed through trust. The cowboy rode on, moving steadily through the plains. He encountered streams, groves, and hills that tested his endurance, yet the memory of the woman and the well gave him strength. Each challenge seemed more manageable, not because it was easier, but because he carried with him the knowledge that trust and cooperation could overcome fear and danger. The plains were still vast and unpredictable, but he no longer felt completely alone. As evening approached, he found a small grove beside a quiet river. The water reflected the setting sun, and he felt a sense of calm wash over him. He fed his horse, set up a small campfire, and reflected on the journey. The lessons of the past days were clear. Courage was important, but so was patience. Survival depended on skill, but also on trust, and even brief connections could leave lasting impacts on the heart and mind. Night fell fully, and the cowboy lay beside the fire, staring at the stars. The memory of the woman at the well, her calm courage, and their shared defense against the bandits replayed in his mind. He realized that moments of trust and cooperation were rare, but they were worth holding on to. They were reminders that even in a harsh and unpredictable world, humans could connect, understand, and support one another. The woman in her village also looked up at the stars, thinking of the cowboy and his journey. She felt a quiet reassurance that he would continue safely, guided by the lessons they had shared and the respect they had earned from each other. Their paths might not cross again, but the bond formed through shared courage and trust would remain, a quiet strength in both their hearts. Days passed, and the cowboy continued his journey. He faced new challenges, navigated difficult terrain, and encountered other travelers along the way. Yet in every encounter, the memory of the woman and the well stayed with him. He carried the small carved bird with him, a reminder of resilience, courage, and the power of brief but meaningful human connection. Each step forward was guided not only by survival instincts, but also by the trust and respect he had experienced and earned. Eventually, the plains stretched endlessly before him, golden in the morning light, quiet under the soft glow of the rising sun. The cowboy rode steadily, carrying water, supplies, and the memory of a shared night of courage. Though his journey continued and the miles ahead were uncertain, he felt a deep sense of purpose and connection. He had faced danger, defended what mattered, and formed a bond that would last even across distance and time. The woman returned to her routine, tending to the village and the well, secure in the knowledge that their encounter had been more than an event of survival. It had been a moment of learning, respect, and human connection. The memory of the cowboy would remain with her as well, a reminder that courage and trust could cross boundaries, that even in a harsh world, cooperation and understanding could flourish. As the sun set over the plains once more, both the cowboy and the woman carried the lessons of their shared experience. They had faced danger, defended what was precious, and discovered the power of trust and cooperation.